Thank you, Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following up on this Coast Guard discussion of icebreakers, you talked about the Polar Star, which is being refurbished, and then it'll head to Antarctica, and then the Healy. But doesn't the United States require like 6 heavy and 4 medium polar icebreakers to meet the Coast Guard and Navy's missions for the future? And doesn't the Navy acquire vessels, you know, at least like 3 per class, so that we actually have the resources? Doesn't the Coast Guard follow a similar model?
We do, Senator, and we usually say it takes 3 to make 1. You have one ship that is persistently present, and if it's in the polar regions, it takes a while to get there. You come back, and that ship, you know, they're breaking ice, and they have to go into a shipyard. So they're taken off cycle, and meanwhile, you have a 3rd ship that's ready to deploy and fill the void left by the ship that's just returned. So whether it's an icebreaker or whether it's an aircraft carrier, whether it's a fast response cutter, a national security cutter, the 3 to make 1 model is pretty consistent across all fleets, not just U.S., but worldwide.
Thank you, thank you. How many nations are laying claim to the Arctic, and how many icebreakers do they have? Do they have at least more than 1 icebreaker to manage their oversight of that region?
I probably just mentioned, I just met this past Thursday and Friday with all of the Arctic Coast Guards. We stood up on Arctic Coast Guard Forum while the United States chairs the Arctic Coast Guard, the Arctic Council. And so Russia has 40. 41. They are in the process of completing another nuclear carrier. It will be the most powerful nuclear icebreaker in the world. When I sit down with the other Coast Guards, we recognize the vastness of the Arctic, the increase in human activity, that none of us singularly have all the resources we would need to respond to a mass rescue, to respond to an oil spill if we see offshore drilling up in the Arctic domain. And that's incumbent upon the Coast Guards of the Arctic to work together. We will meet again.
But you're not saying that our response to an oil spill or something in the Arctic is call the Russians.
We may have to. And so if you want to hold that thought, I go back to the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. I was a federal on-scene coordinator. We had over 20 filled requests for international assistance. We didn't have enough skimmers in our United States inventory. Russia today would be problematic. Where's our relationship with Russia going to be 20, 30 years in the lifetime of a heavy icebreaker? So I need to think beyond the present, but how do we look at brokering those assets? We do know that if there's a vessel in distress, it doesn't matter what our tensions may be, the rule of a good Samaritan will come to bear.
Well, I'm going to leave the response to that to my able colleague from Alaska, who I think will join with me in saying we don't think the United States' response to the Arctic should be call the Russians. But I'll let him follow up on that because I have to ask you 2 other things. One,